Hey there, fellow air gaugers. So this is Easter Sunday. Yesterday we did a hydro test on the 58 and didn't find anything too concerning. And after that we fired up. So that was the first fire up of the year. I didn't take any video because we had a bunch of issues I had to deal with and some other things that cropped up. And basically all I wanted to do was get a fire in it and build up some pressure to make sure, we didn't have any leaks or any problems. The one problem that we had from the outset was this blowdown valve that when there's no pressure in the boiler, it was leaking around this stem here, coming out there. And so I think what we're going to do is go back to the way it was originally, which is putting a valve back here, something of a positive shutoff, and then putting this out here. And fortunately, I have not cut any holes in here to put the operating rigging in place yet. So this is just a matter of just taking this apart, put a valve back there, and then put this up in here. But I'm not going to use that same gate valve that I had in here before, because to handle the gate valve was hitting the back of the support, and it was practically impossible to turn it. It would get stuck on it. So we'll make that change, and because of that I had to drain all the water back out of the boiler, which is no big deal since now we have unlimited water out of the reservoir on top of the hill. The other problem we had is that when backing this up, the drawbar and the buffer and the drawbar swung over to the left far enough that it bypassed the buffer on the tender, and they bypassed, and then the tender hit the back of the cab. You can see or scraped the paint. So, okay, well, this is the first time we've ever tried to do this with these two pieces of equipment since the tender was built, so I knew there'd be a certain amount of teething pains as we get all this stuff to work together. So my first my first reaction to this is to take the spring out that's in here. It's a light spring, and put this spring in its place, and this is about twice the capacity of this other one, which means that when you're backing up, it's not going to push the buffer in nearly as far as it was. It was just bottoming out on these springs, and it turns out that those springs were a little too light for the job. So I bought this one on McMaster Car, and I'm going to swap those out. The other thing I'm going to do is try to take up some of the slack in the chains, make the chains so that when you couple these two together, that there is a little that when you couple it together, you push in this buffer, which compresses the spring a little bit, and I want that to be compressed just a little bit when we hook the chains up, and so that when it's in a buff condition, in draft, when it's pulling, that the chains are always tight. Because what happened is that this one chain here allowed that buffer to slide over. So I'm going to make these changes, which will be relatively easy and simple to do, and then we'll try this again. And if the situation continues, I may have to just take the buffers off of this completely and then go back to a link and pin arrangement here with just a straight drawbar. Trying to avoid that because I like having that little bit of cushioning between the two instead of a rough connection. So of course all this is all tore apart to do that. We didn't have much coal, so we used mostly wood and a little bit of coal we had left over from last year. I've got to get out and get a truckload of coal here before too long, before we do our next fire up. We didn't really have any other issues with the engine. It's she's holding together rather well. Did have some problem with this new injector. So this is what's called a Garfield double jet. Not much information out there about them. This is the same type injector that these engines had originally. But the problem I'm having with this particular one is that you'd get it started and you'd hear it start to inject, and then the sound would change, and then it'd start blowing steam down through the delivery pipe and then back into the tank, and you can hear the steam bubbling up into the tank, and then the delivery line would get real hot and it would stop injecting. So I played around with it quite a bit. The only instructions I've ever found for this was a little blurb in a magazine article in 1896 telling you how to operate it. And basically, it's you start out with these two valves open. This one here is a drain. Of course, this is going into the boiler. This here is what turns the steam on, and then of course you've got a valve up there for the steam, and you have a valve down there for the water. So you start out, you open the water valve, then you turn the steam on a little bit, and what that's supposed to do, this bottom jet here, steam comes down through here, goes here, and creates a suction to pull that water up, and then goes down into the drain. So once it's doing that, now of course we have water supplied under pressure because this is lower than the tank. And they recommend putting a globe valve down here to reduce the amount of water pressure coming in. So once that water's flowing into here, then you can turn your steam on a little bit. And then once you've got steam pushing that water down the drain, you close this valve, and then you close this valve here, and then once you've got water going down the drain after this valve's closed, then you close the drain valve. And then that water has nowhere to go but to go towards the boiler. Then it shoots down through here and into the boiler. And that's how it's supposed to work. But for some reason, with this open, it's instead of going that way into the boiler, it's finding the path of least resistance and then going this way and going back into the tank. So I'm just going to initially put a check valve down here and see what that does. See if, since it won't be able to push this way, then it has nowhere to go but to go into the boiler. And that may solve the problem. It's a little odd because there's no check valve that I know of on the other two locomotives. So I don't know. But that's about the only thing I can think of to try. And if I can't get it to work after that, then we're just going to have to pull this back off and, maybe go back to the Penberthy on it. So, yeah, little issue. I mean, it's not that the thing's worn out. This is a brand new injector. I bought it on eBay, and it was still in its original wooden crate that it came in. So it's never been used. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with the injector itself. It's just got to be something wrong in the plumbing. So we'll get that figured out here pretty soon, and probably try to fire up next weekend again and see how things go. And maybe then I'll bring the GoPro out and set it up and take some video of us operating, and maybe we'll even take her up the hill. Well, I don't know about that because we still won't have brakes in the tender, and I'll tell you what, after running this thing with steam brakes, not having any brakes at all right now, until we get the air brakes put on, I really prefer having brakes on it, because just simple things like trying to bring the locomotive to a stop so that you can go out and put a wheel chock under it, the thing just wants to keep rolling. So it's real hard to even do that. Okay, well, that's all I got for today, everyone. Happy Easter.